I have a question for you, Jennifer, because I'm a holiday freak too, that just loves and to go over the top. What is your favorite holiday?
Can I answer it?
No.
The next holiday.
Yeah, that's mine too.
Well, no, I was going to ask you, so with your question, what month is it? Because whatever month it is, that's going to be my favorite holiday.
Okay, so you don't have like a true favorite. Like, this is my favorite to decorate
Okay,
for.
I will say, I probably get the most excited about Halloween, which is
love
kind of crazy,
Halloween,
but
too.
I think it's because it is introducing me to all of the holidays.
Right.
It's like I've kind of taken this sabbatical during the summer a
Yes.
little bit, and it's like once fall hits and I realize, oh my gosh, I'm gonna
Here we
decorate.
go.
Here we go again.
Yes.
So I would say I get the most excited about
Yeah.
Halloween, but I love them all.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Living Fully podcast. I'm thrilled to be with two guests today. The Houghtons are with me today. This is Steve and Jennifer Houghton. If you have seen social media, someone going like over the top with their holiday decor in their home, it's going to be Jennifer. Turtle Creek Lane is her Instagram handle, and that is my initial introduction to the Houghtons because I'm holiday centric too. I was fascinated by you and your content. And then I started seeing my friends talk about Steve's book. He wrote this book called Rich Routines. And I started looking into your family, and I realized there were a lot of similarities between your family and my family. The intentionality in which you raise your children, the way that you impart your legacy, it's very similar to the way that I was brought up. And I got very curious. And then now, having read your book, I do realize that we are very similar in a lot of things. And you are also living fully. And I think that Rich Routines talks about living fully and the message of living fully in the way that you do with these routines. And so I'm really excited to have these two guests on today.
We're honored to be here.
We are. Thank you.
I told Jennifer, I said, you're even more beautiful in person.
Oh.
Do people tell you that?
You did, and that was nice enough.
I mean, and Steve said that people think that she's his trophy wife because their children are so spread apart in age. And I said, what a great compliment. I would love to be called a trophy wife. No one's called me that
Well,
yet.
Steve is always very sweet.
He is very sweet.
She is my trophy. I just got
she
my trophy the
is.
first time.
You did. That's a great line. He got his trophy the first time. And tell me about your family, your children. So your oldest, Steven.
He is 33.
33. Okay.
Married to Kimmy, and they have two daughters,
Okay.
Stevie Kate and London.
Okay.
And
Next.
Tiffany.
Tiffany.
Tiffany's married to Adam.
Okay.
And they have Lily, and they're expecting a son they just found out. So our fourth grandchild.
How exciting.
Yes, and then Tanner and Katie, they live in Dallas as well. And then we have a really big gap. Tanner was an identical twin. We lost one in the pregnancy. Took us years to get pregnant again. And we have our little miracle Samuel, came 11 years later. And then we have McKenna Kate. So we have like this older group of the three together. And then we have an 11-year gap. And then these two little ones together, Sam and McKenna Kate. Sam is a senior and McKenna Kate is a sophomore.
I love it. I love it too because we were talking about this, and you also are a very faith-filled woman, but you did 9 years of fertility treatments, you said, and then just kind of gave it to God. And of course, tale as old as time, got pregnant.
I will tell
love
you,
those
one
stories.
thing I have learned about God is if you tell him what to do, he's going to humble you, and then he's going to tell you what you really need.
Yeah.
And that was, I think it took me a longer time to learn that lesson than probably most women, but I did learn it. And I learned that there is God's timing.
Yes.
And we have to submit our will to that timing. It was an important lesson.
I agree with that. And speaking of God's timing, sometimes God will surprise us with something that we don't feel is even going to be a part of our story. Like you writing a book, Steve. So you're like a lot of people that are like, I never thought I would write a book. So I love Rich Routines because it's about simple habits that can enrich your life. And I also love it because you're a very smart man that wrote a book that anybody can read and take something from. And I think that that's hard to do when you're very intelligent, and you did it very well. I just want to go ahead and commend you on that.
Stop it some more.
I'm serious. I think that you could pick up any chapter in this book and gain a simple habit to enrich your life. And we'll talk about like the rich routines, like the foundations and the way that you apply them in your family. But why did you write the book?
I asked myself that question for the 2 years I was working on it.
Yeah, you and me both.
So my oldest 3 kids had encouraged me to write a book, and it just kind of pinged me at different times, and I'm like, no, that's not something I really want to do. And then a couple of years ago, my son Stephen pulled me aside and said, Dad, I think you're making a big mistake, not writing a book. He said, your life is so different from the way you were raised.
Yes.
And from your siblings. And if you lose those things and don't pass them on to your children and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, he said, I think that's a big mistake, and I think you're being short-sighted. So I've gone out and I found a ghostwriter.
Amen, Stephen.
And you just need to do it. So I thought, well, it can't be that hard if I have a ghostwriter. Mm-hmm. Turns out
it's still hard. It's harder.
Yeah,
harder.
I made the decision. Anyway, it was a much harder process than I imagined.
Yeah.
But now that it's done, I'm really glad I did it.
I bet, too, because I agree with Stephen in that sometimes you think that your legacy and the things that you say, you've imparted them on your children. They've seen the way that you lived, and this is going to live on. However, you see just one generation removed how you really have to be intentional about being like, actually, this is what the Houghton family stands for. This is what your grandpa thinks about this. And the information and the rich wisdom is so valuable. In our family, we did these videos where we asked our grandparents questions, like all kinds of questions. We all got to submit like 6 questions. And having them on video answering those questions is priceless. It is the most amazing thing. I wish everyone had access to a book of someone that was wise in their family, a parent or grandparent, or a video. So I'm really glad that you wrote the book. I agree with you that they're hard to write.
Well, I think when it was finished, I was more relieved than happy.
Yes, I agree with you.
But I also didn't intend to write it. It was a family project.
Yeah.
And I didn't intend to publish it. But and nobody in the family got to look at it until I was on my final copy, and then I let Jennifer and my 3 oldest kids read it. And I hoped they would like it, but it's hard for me to evaluate my own work.
Yeah.
And they loved it, and they were like, oh my gosh, you have to release this. And I'm like, well, I shared some kind of personal stories that I might not have intended necessarily to share more broadly, but the more I thought about it, I thought, if it'll be helpful, then I want to be helpful.
Yeah.
And there's some failures in there. Jennifer didn't know about me getting dumped by my college girlfriend.
I loved it that you kept that part in the book, because I had a story about a dumping in my book too, and my husband was like, "Oh, really? We're going to give him some airtime, okay?" Still hanging on to that, right?
Well, and talking about where our marriage nearly,
Oh, that's one of my favorite
failed.
parts of the book.
And so anyway, but I did want to be raw with my kids because I wanted it to be meaningful to them and persuasive to them. And so anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that you have, in writing the book and doing the hard thing here, it created something that is going to really stand the test of time. You talk about the 5 foundations in rich routines: spiritual wealth, physical wealth, mental wealth, emotional wealth, financial wealth. I also love that financial wealth is 5th, because a lot of times when people say the word wealth, everybody always just thinks money. And that is so something that my family has imparted on me my entire life too. And I know you guys impart on your kids. That is not the full picture. And that is like not what we are trying to gain on earth, is only that type of wealth. So I love it how you went into each of these: spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, financial. And one thing that I really connected with you guys on was this aspect of spiritual wealth. You said that that's the most important one to the Houghton family. I loved the story in the book about how, there's so many stories in the book where I'm just like, this family, how do you do it like this? Like where you do the scriptures and you make the kids recite the scriptures and all this stuff. I just thought that it was so amazing, and I was like, gosh, I want to be like them. But then there was a part in the book where you said that was very relatable. That is definitely what goes on in my house, where your son came home and you had on a Monday the same outfit that you wore to church, and he was like, Sunday was yesterday. Like, we have to do church again, because that is something that is the reality in a lot of homes. Even though I think we have made Jesus just seem so amazing, my kids are like, ugh, church is so boring. And you said so many people, forget to make that aspect, their spiritual aspect of their life, like they make it dull. And so that was something that you guys challenged yourself to do in your family. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was something that I took from the book, and I really liked that piece.
Yeah, well, I think that spiritual goes beyond going to church. And while that can be, while for us that was an important component and is an important component, a spiritual foundation goes beyond that.
Yes.
And I also think that we are most persuaded by people we like to be around and have fun with.
Yes.
And so if we Jennifer and I really wanted to be persuasive to our kids, and just recognizing the importance fun has in building a strong family. I mean, service is important and all these other things are important. But if the kids hate it, what's the likelihood they really stick with it? And I think it diminishes it a lot. And so I do think that fun is, working fun into everything in your life. Hey, it makes life more fun.
It's true. And especially with kids.
Well,
too.
and I will add, we started something that we still do it to this day. Monday night is our family night.
Yes, I love that.
And that's when we would make the spirituality fun, because they didn't realize it was spiritual. We would have a really fun lesson. It was more of a value type lesson about honesty or integrity or character.
Yeah.
And so we'd have a really fun lesson, and then we'd always have some sort of a treat, and we'd do an activity. And so that became something where we were able to teach our children a spiritual foundation without just reciting scripture.
Yes.
And it became very fun for them. And now that our kids are older, Monday night is just family dinner. And so we just go out. Whoever can make it, we do family dinner now. So we've tried to carry that legacy on. But just this idea, figure out what your kids have fun doing together. Create a lesson around a value that you want to teach your children. Say if you're struggling with honesty, then the lesson comes on from you. I would say the peanut butter boy right now about, I had a picture of this boy, and he got peanut butter rubbed on him every time he told a lie, and how it was dirtying his spirit. You know what I mean? And make it fun, because if it's not fun, the kids are never gonna remember it.
Yeah.
Fun and brief.
Yeah.
Fun and brief.
And brief. Steve would always say, Jen, you got 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Well, I was reading about, you were talking about, like, you were that night in the book that you were talking about, you were telling the story of Samson and how he was given all these things to succeed and these things from God, and then he got in his own way by being self-absorbed, and talking about how you made that into a lesson for your kids. I was like, what a good idea. What a simple thing to do. And I mean, you do recite the scripture too, because I read that part too, that all your kids could recite 30 minutes of scripture, which I was like, awesome. But I love the two sides of you guys too. I love it how you infuse fun in so many things. And the Houghton family song that your kids would sing in the morning, all of that stuff that I read in the book, it's the intentionality around family, around that spiritual wealth that is fascinating, but that I also feel like anybody listening to this podcast can impart on their own children. I don't think it's an overhaul necessarily. I think sometimes it's an easy addition.
So many of these things, they're simple. Nothing that I talk about in the book or that we have done with our family is like rocket science. They're all simple things that are trying to impart some kind of principle and infuse a principle. And it's very, very doable, but they're small, simple things that anybody can do, but it does require doing them. And doing them over time. It's not something where you can just quickly do it once and be done.
I agree.
But if it's too hard, we moms can't do it. You know what I mean? It's like,
especially when you have a lot of kids,
like
you do.
Yeah, 5 kids. I mean, I was overwhelmed half the time. So it was like when Steve said brief, literally, it was a 10-minute lesson, and then we played. It can't be overwhelming, or we won't do it.
They can't dread it.
Yes.
Because if they dread it, it won't be effective.
Right.
Now, it's okay to do some things that they may dread,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that they always just, were eagerly anticipating church every Sunday.
Yeah.
But we would find other things that surrounded and that made our Sundays
Right.
fun and enjoyable that we could all do together.
it mimics life. I mean, there are things in life that we do that we may not enjoy, but we have to remember to have fun and enjoy life too. And I think a lot of times we forget that. So speaking of the, intentionality here, the focus, something that I really loved in the book that I think is very effective, and I've said this a lot in my Living Fully content, is the personal mission statement. I think that so many people are just living with, whatever comes in front of them takes their attention, and they are just one thing to the next, task after task. This is what I do after this in life. No one is really thinking, how do I want to live? And refocusing their lives if they feel like they get a little bit out of whack. I want to read your mission statement because I really like it. And it's to remind me that my mission is to be happy and optimistic, to build my life on timeless principles, to seek and embrace productive frameworks, to live fully with enthusiasm, integrity, and self-respect, and to never give up. And then he goes on to say, to fulfill this mission, I strive to bless the lives of those who matter most to me, lists off all of his people in his life. And I love that mission statement. And most of all, I love that it continues to refocus and recenter you as life gets busy and crazy, because you have a big business and you have 5 children. So why do you think it's important to have a personal mission statement?
Because it gives you the why for what you're doing. And for me, it re-anchors me, and I try to spend even if it's just 5 minutes on Sundays where I reflect on my mission statement, and I can always reflect on things the previous week where I could have done better. Perfection is an illusion. We're never going to be perfect. I'm never going to perfectly live my mission statement, but it's directional. And so if it helps me, reorients me to true north. Because I think there's so many things. Everything wants to make us a cog in somebody else's machine. And so we have to be really deliberate if we're not to become a cog and not to live someone else's priorities. We need to make sure they're our own.
And I feel like that was a big part of your story too. Like, you opened the whole book with, you were selling books door to door when you were 18, 19 years old, and you were like, this is how I'm going to get rich. You were a cog in someone else's machine.
I was.
But do you know what I love about that story? That you were just like bombing, nothing was going well, and you were like, we have got to quit. Everybody else has quit. And then you met these people, you open your mind, you meet these people that teach you about sales, and you became like the best salesperson and then led the best sales team in this entire company. I think that was the most amazing story. And I love it that you opened the book with it. So I know that that's an amazing story too. And it was a reminder to me that even if you feel like you're in maybe a job that you hate, or you're in a situation that you don't want to be in, you can still make the best of it because it's serving a purpose. That served a purpose, I feel like, in your life in a big way.
Oh, yeah. No, it was a hugely foundational part, because that was when, I grew up very modest. I mean, I worked in the lunchroom so I could get free lunch. And we heated our home growing up with a wood stove. And if I didn't bring the wood in the night before and it snowed, I would have to clear all the snow off the wood and get even colder to get that wood. And so, and it was all good. I mean, I had a wonderful upbringing, but I didn't necessarily want that to be my future.
Right.
And I was terrified that I would never be able to provide for my family. Learning to sell that summer was so important. I remember I felt so much pressure because I thought, if I fail at this, I'm never going to be able to do anything, which was like all or nothing crazy thinking, but that's how I felt. But then when I ultimately succeeded at it, I thought, hey, I'm not going to starve. I will be able to have a family.
Yeah.
And it gave me great confidence. And I think confidence is such an important element in anyone's success.
I agree with that. So fast forward to, you have garnered a lot of success and you achieve one of your dreams, which is buying a Ferrari. I love this story. I know this is probably everybody's favorite story, and they probably all ask you, so sorry if it's repetitive. But I love the story more than any of the stories in the book because it also teaches us a lesson on kindness and giving without needing any sort of certain response or anything in return. And kindness is a part of, I think, your personal mission and who you are and what you've taught your children. So can you tell me this story about you and this Ferrari and this kid who crashed into your Ferrari?
I mean, I had always wanted a fast car, but I was driving a truck around, and Jennifer's like, Steve, you need a nicer car. And I said, like, would getting a nicer car translate into anything from you? And she's like, oh, yeah. And so the next day, I brought home a Ferrari. I went and bought a black Ferrari, and I loved it. And I was kind of uncomfortable at first because a Ferrari felt pretentious to me, and yet it was so fun to drive. And I love, I've got a friend who says, of course you're good at driving fast because you practice all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I loved the car, and I quickly got over feeling uncomfortable in it. But I'm driving through a parking lot one day, slowly because there's a lot of cars there, and I see this car backing up, and it clearly doesn't see me. And so I'm trying to put it in reverse and back up to get out of the way, but I'm too slow, and he crunches into my front quarter panel. And my initial reaction is, I'm so upset. This is my dream car. And then I see this teenage kid get out, and he is hysterical. And
as any teenage kid would have been. Yeah.
I just imagined how I would feel. Suddenly it's like, this is not the end of the world. And so I said, hey, let me call your dad. I said, because he's like, my dad is going to kill me. My first wreck is an effing Ferrari. and I'm like, you know what, though? Nobody's hurt, and cars can be repaired. And so I called and spoke to his dad because he wasn't being reckless.
Yeah.
He just didn't. He just made a mistake. He hadn't driven that much. And so had a nice conversation with his dad. And then afterwards I realized my car can still be driven. It doesn't look very good, but it would drive fine. And so I said, hey, you love Ferraris. I love Ferraris. You want to drive it? And he was surprised, but said, yeah, I'd love to drive a Ferrari. And so we went on a drive. And as we're driving and just casually visiting, for whatever reason, he really opened up about his life and told me he went to school with one of my kids, and he knew my son, but he said, I haven't been around for a year, and talked about how his life had gotten spiraled out of control with drugs, and how he'd been in rehab, and he was just getting out of rehab. And we drove for like 45 minutes or longer, and I just saw, here's a boy that's really a good kid. And so I said, hey, you know what? In a year, why don't we circle back? He said, I'll probably have a new Ferrari by then. But it was a great reminder to me of how good it feels to be kind. To somebody that you're getting nothing from.
Yes.
It's not being kind because you're trying to get ahead or whatever. It's just being kind because that's who you are.
Yes. What a good lesson. But you left out the best part of the story, which was that you told him he didn't have to pay for the damage done to your Ferrari if he stayed sober for a year. And that is the ultimate act of kindness. And I love it. And I love it that you got emotional. It makes me emotional too. But think about the power of putting yourself in someone else's shoes, someone in a vulnerable state. How you could have been the mean rich guy with the Ferrari, and that's not who you are.
But that doesn't make you happy.
No, it doesn't. But I think that story is such a lesson in kindness, and it's one that I couldn't forget about after reading the book. I thought that was really cool.
Well, thank you.
And the end of the story was?
So Jennifer, this isn't in the book, but I'll give you this. So,
oh, great. I love BTS.
So when I turned 50, Jennifer said, Steve, I've done all the math, and the cheapest midlife crisis you can have is the red Ferrari parked in the driveway. And so that was my new Ferrari that he drove after a year, but that's my midlife crisis car. I'll probably never sell that. I just can't. It's too precious.
It's too good of a story.
But we ran into him again. Remember, ran into him at the grocery store, and it was a year later. And you said, hey, let's circle back up.
No, I called him.
Oh, you called him?
I called him because I told him that I was going to, that we would circle back, and we did, and had a really nice drive.
I guess I ran into him at the grocery store.
You ran into him at the grocery store.
Well, that's
shopping
better
for
than
all
him
those
running
kids.
into you.
Yeah, that's
so.
true.
He ran into you at
Yeah,
the grocery
that's right.
store. Oh Lord, that's such a great story. There are so many great stories in this book, too, and another one as we're drinking our Diet Cokes too, and going on to physical wealth. I think that physical well-being is something that young people take for granted because everybody feels good when they're young. And I do believe that like there are so many choices that we make as young people that can really influence like how we're going to be as energetic grandparents or like in the end of our life or just the mental clarity that comes from being healthy. So I love the part where you guys talked about like swapping out for clean eating, how important that was to you guys and kind of your journey with that. I think that's a really good read in the book because everybody's always trying to do that. But you said something that I literally say all the time, which is removing the friction and how important that is when you're trying to create a new habit. And I've said it all the time because I would go to the YMCA to exercise. I have like some blood sugar irregularities, especially while pregnant. And walking on the treadmill is a game changer for me. But with this many kids and this many businesses, making that 15-minute drive and then having someone to watch the kids and staying there for an hour, it was what was the friction standing in my way. My husband got me a treadmill in our garage for Mother's Day, which was a controversial gift, but he got me
I was
that.
thinking your husband's brave.
It removed, he was like, she asked for it. It removed the friction for me, and I exercised 5 days a week for like a solid year, and it changed my health journey. And so talk a little bit about that because I love it that you say it in the book that we all have a finite amount of self-discipline. I think that is so true. And so this is just one of those simple habit changes that can enrich your life that I read in the book that's very fantastic, that I personally really liked.
For me, a big part of being able to eat clean is creating friction. Because if
Yes.
there is ice cream in the freezer,
You're going to eat it, me
I'm
too.
going to eat it. Or if there's chips or other stuff in our pantry. And so Jennifer went through and cleaned out, much to our teenagers' chagrin.
Bless them. They're
all
like,
of
that's
the-
not fair for the older kids. They got to eat all this stuff.
Yeah, all of the junk food.
Yeah, I did the same
and
thing.
then found healthy substitutes. And just creating additional friction to finding bad food made it much easier
Yeah.
for us to stick with it. But then in addition to that, Jennifer did a wonderful job of figuring out healthy alternatives
Yes.
to replace it with, so you don't just have this empty vacuum of things you can't eat, but by replacing it with other healthy alternatives that are delicious. Even if, like the cauliflower rice, I didn't love it at first, but after you eat it for a little while, it's amazing
used to
how
it.
how flexible our tastes are.
Yeah, yeah. And like that's just like, like you talk about this whole entire book. It's just it's a small shift. It's a small habit that makes a really big difference. And I love the friction piece because like I said, it's something that I say too. And I think that's something that anybody listening to this podcast, remove the friction from the good things, add the friction for the bad things. When I go home to Kentucky, it is so easy for me to be healthy and clean because my mom's healthy and clean, and we ain't got no delivery service. So if you don't have the access to it, you're not going to eat it. Another story that I really love that I think describes you and how you are as a parent, how you are as a grandparent, started again, I think was it Steven that told you that you had been doing it wrong a little bit with the parenting styles. And I loved that. I love how vocal he is to you and your parenting style and what you should do in
let
your
us
life,
know.
Steve. I think it's great. He sounds like a really confident, strong, awesome son.
He is.
Yeah, I can tell. So he was on his mission and he wrote to you and he was talking about something that he'd learned about like fostering a growth mindset in your kids. And you, like any parent, like I realized I'm doing it too, you were praising the innate talents, the things they were already good at. You are so smart. You are so this, that. And it's really hard as a parent to shift the way of thinking to the try again, kind of the like encouraging them. Talk a little bit about that because I don't want to butcher what you were talking about because it's actually very good.
Well, so I came across Carol Dweck's research, and this was before she had published her best-selling book entitled Mindset. But I read the research, and I'm like, holy smokes, we have done
done
this
all
all wrong.
wrong."
I gave it to Jennifer, and we're like, yeah. So we sent it to Steven, and he read it, and he was like, he wrote
Yeah,
back
you're
and said,
right.
yeah, you guys might have gotten that one wrong, but you did everything else so well. I'm
We're
going to
gonna
be
be
fine.
fine.
Don't worry about it. So he was gentle with us. But that book is really a foundational book for Jennifer and me, and quickly became that once she released it. But just the idea, praise our kids not on things they can't control, but praise them on the things they can control.
Yeah.
And it's it really is remarkable. It's a powerful principle, and
Yeah, for sure. And I like it how you decided to do that in your life. So you decided that you need to learn to unicycle in your 50s, because Stephen had decided that with the two younger kids that you were doing it wrong, and that you needed to show them that you could fail over and over and over at something, or try really hard and learn something that you're not intrinsically good at. And I thought that was the best story. And did you ever learn to unicycle? Like, I know you're a good cyclist.
Oh, he
but-
goes like 17 miles a day on his unicycle.
Oh, you go 17 miles a
even
day? How did I miss that?
He even has the off-road one that he rides in Deer Valley up the mountain.
The unicycle.
He's incredible. Yeah.
That's really awesome, Steve.
you know what? All it takes is about 20,000 curse words.
You're so much like my dad, because my dad will ride those one wheel things like all the time. Not the unicycles, but the one that's
Yeah.
like on
Yeah.
the surfboard, and he loves those, and he just rides it everywhere. And I'm just like, gosh, what are these kids gonna say about their grandpa? Like one day mountain climbing and riding these one wheel things, and but it's something else you said in the book that I was like, I've got to call my dad and tell him that line. That's I think someone said, your friend said to you, if you let the old man inside of you, you'll never get him out.
Yeah.
I was like, what a great line. And you don't let the old man inside of you. Neither does my dad. You're not an old man, so that's why you haven't let him in yet. He's probably
well-
not looking for you yet. But that's a great line.
I do need to meet your father. But, another lesson that I learned, though, from the whole unicycle thing, because let's face it, unicycling is not something you try to slip into a conversation to impress people. I mean, it's what
Wow.
clowns do in the circus, right? And yet, learning something that was so trivial but difficult, it's really satisfying.
Is
and I
it?
think so many times as we age, we avoid risks and we
Yeah.
avoid failure. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's important that as we continue to go through life, that we continue to have some failures, that we continue to do some things that maybe we're not going to be good at initially, but by sticking with it, we become good at it.
When did you learn that, though? Because that's something that I only want to do the things that I know I'm going to succeed at and that I'm really good at.
I can tell you, as a kid growing up, my whole mantra was, if at first you don't succeed, quit quickly and hide all evidence you ever tried.
Quit quickly. I thought you were going to say try again. That's
No,
great.
no. Quit quickly and hide.
We had the same motto.
I
Yeah.
mean, I was terrified of failing.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that as I got older and became an adult, that I modified that. Because as we tell our kids, if they're not having some failures, they're playing in the wrong league.
Yeah.
If you win the Super Bowl every year, then maybe you need to get out of Little League and graduate to a more difficult
Yeah.
league,
Yes.
because you're not accomplishing anything.
Yeah.
And we need to continually challenge ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the mental wealth, like going into that piece of mental wealth and keeping your mind right and being okay with failures and growth and being a lifelong learner and all the things that you talk about. There's another line in the book. Tell me what you think about when you don't have to think, and I'll tell you what you are and largely what you will become. I agree with that line. Mindset is so unbelievably powerful in the way that your life turns out. And so many people, I think, are addicted to negative thinking. All they think about is everything that's going wrong or like the stress of things. They're down on themselves. And I'm like, positive thinking, it sounds so just like standing here with a bunch of balloons like Pollyanna, like acting like, but it is so powerful. It is so powerful. So I love it that you talked about that in the book, and you have 4 methods. 1, looking for the positive. I so agree with you in that. 2, developing an abundance mindset. 3, making the right choices with limited information. That's a great one. And 4, committing to lifelong learning. Which of those is, in your opinion, the method that you use the most, or like the most important method? I know they're all important, but.
Well, I think the first one is first for a reason. Mm-hmm. I think that we can only take in a limited amount of stimulus in our world. And so we train our brains what's important to us, and then our brains go out like a retriever and retrieve that.
Yes.
And I grew up with a retriever, and my dad would never let him chase rabbits. And I'm like, Dad, come on. He's like, Steve, if he chases rabbits, he'll always be distracted with rabbits, and that's not what we're after. He's only going to get praised when he finds those birds that we like to eat. And so in a similar way, our brain is like that retriever, and we train our brain what to retrieve and what to look for.
Yeah.
And so when we're always thinking about negative thoughts or scary thoughts or things we don't want, we're reinforcing our brain to go find that. And so, but if we are training our brain for the positive, then it's always looking out for the positive. And we find more, and because we're looking for positive, we see more positive.
Yes.
And because we see more positive, we feel more positive, and it's this virtuous cycle. And, you know, Jennifer has been a really good example of this.
I was going to say that. Mm-hmm.
I'll let you say it then.
I was going to say, I feel like you married the right person to put positivity at the forefront of your life and your home. Who you marry is so important. That is what you exude to me, is positivity. You just seem like you just love the life that you're living. And I love to watch that.
Well, thank you. And, and I wouldn't say that I don't have down days, because I do, and everybody does. But I have found in my life personally, when I start to feel a little down, or I start to feel a little discouraged or overwhelmed, the best thing I can do is immediately go to gratitude.
Yes.
And if I can start thinking about something that I'm grateful for, that will make that mind shift for me. And it's just been amazing, that power. And that's why on Turtle Creek Lane, every morning, let's pause, take 5 seconds, submit something we're grateful for, because happiness begins with gratitude.
Yes, it does.
And I truly want people to be happier. And it's the only way, it's the best way that I know in a big arena for people to be able to quickly do something that is so powerful. And so I think for me personally, gratitude has really changed my life, because we all have hard days. You know, my life isn't perfect. My life isn't always happy. But if you train your brain to look for the positive, to look for something you're grateful for, it will start to see that. And so when you get down, just immediately think, what am I grateful for right now? And it makes a huge difference.
It really does. And it's like easy to do that.
You can do it, yes, you can in your car. In fact, the other day, Steve and I were both kind of sitting in the car, and we're like, just feeling just a little bit discouraged about something that was going on. And Steve started singing the Houghton song. It's a great day to be a Houghton. And we both started singing the Houghton song. You know what I mean?
I think it'd be wonderful if I'll sing if she'll do the dance.
I'd love that. We're going to end the podcast with that.
There is a dance that goes with it. We used to have our kids do it when they were young. They won't do it anymore.
I know. I read it in the book, and I was like,
so
I want to know the song, because you read the song in the book, in the audio book. I wanted you to sing the song, but it also taught your kids not to take things too seriously.
No.
And to have fun. Like you said, fun is a value. I love that fun is a value. Fun is a value for me, too. But I love that. Gratitude is a value for me, and fun is a value for me. And I think that that's why I really connected with those two parts of your book. Something else that I really connected to is that, you know, you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything you want. I forget that sometimes, because I do 900 things, like I'm sure you've done in your life.
Oh, you do more than 900.
I do 900.
You're being modest now.
You're sweet. But it's like, it's true that you have to prioritize, because there are trade-offs. And you talked about this in your book. And it was one of those like, oh, I know he's preaching to the choir right now. Like, I needed to read this line, because that is something that sometimes people, including me, have to learn the hard way. You get burned out, and then you have to learn to prioritize. So what kind of, like, what's example of like a trade-off that you've made when prioritizing in your life, since we can't do everything?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is in business, I have been deliberate about finding businesses and investments and opportunities that don't require me to travel a lot. Because
Great one. Yeah.
I could have lived on the road, and sometimes that's required of people's businesses, and I think we all have to make decisions for ourselves. And so I'm not being prescriptive for others, but for me, I knew I didn't want to travel all the time.
Yeah.
When I travel without Jennifer, I get homesick on the way to the airport. Travel is fun if I'm with her. And so, yeah, there are deals that I missed because they
Trade-offs.
would have required my attention, but traveling, and I just didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so if I didn't have somebody that could travel for me to take care of those things, then I just would look for other opportunities that didn't require that.
I love that. And I love that you knew yourself well enough and you prioritized correctly that was the trade-off you were willing to make. Because sometimes it's hard when you're in the prime of your business to leave money on the table and deals on the table. Also, that abundance mindset comes in there. You know that there's going to be more. You know you're going to be okay. And that's the trade-off you're willing to make. I think that's great.
Another example of it might be early on with my business, I made a decision to not raise a bunch of, and we saved $20,000 and then financed the rest on credit cards. And so it would have been helpful to go raise money, and I could have, but then I would have had a bunch of investors that I would have to keep
I agree.
happy.
I did the same thing.
And I just decided I would rather have a smaller business where I'm not answering to a lot of people and I don't have lots of things pulling on me, but rather keep my business simple and keep my life simpler. And, maybe it's, you never know the path you didn't take. But I remember at the time thinking, I might not make as much money, but that's okay.
Yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That was your trade-off. And you were very successful, but also while keeping your priorities intact, which is hard to do, I think, especially in the peak and prime of your business. Something that I think helps you guys and has helped you live this amazing life is the shared vision. And I like how you talked about that in the book, how important it is to have a shared vision with the people that you're in relationship with. That seems like it would be a no-brainer. That is not a no-brainer. There are so many people that I do not believe have a shared vision with their spouse, with their business partners, with the people that they're getting advice from. And I think that was a very simple point in the book, but that was a very big aha moment, I think, for a lot of people that will be reading this book. So talk a little bit about that, how important it is to have a shared vision, whether it's in your business, whether it's with Jennifer, whether it's with your friends, because that was one of my favorite parts of the book.
I think that if somebody that is as important as your spouse or a business partner, if you have different goals, how are you going to end up at the same place?
Amen.
And yet I think that sometimes people aren't deliberate about that. In our early years, fortunately we were, and we had a very clear idea of what we wanted our life to look like because we talked about it and we planned, and there were times that we didn't necessarily see everything eye to eye, and in those areas we would work to find agreement and compromise, but it just makes it so much easier. I mean, our first years we lived frugally, really, really frugally.
Yes.
But it wasn't me telling Jennifer to not spend money or Jennifer telling me not to. I mean, it
You had
was
a shared
us.
vision.
Yeah, we were working together, and we had different roles. But Jennifer's been my partner in everything that I've done, and I've been her partner. And just because she wasn't at the office when our kids were young, because she was home with our kids, she was absolutely my partner. And we just had different positions that we played.
I love the story that you shared in the book about your 1-year anniversary, because everybody sees you now and you've been married for so many years, and they're like, well, okay, that was just a match made in heaven. You said something in the book that is so true, that great marriages are not found, they're built. I think that's an amazing line, and I think it's very true. And so at your 1 year anniversary, you are literally having a conversation. You said we only had one fight our entire first year of marriage, but it continued for the entire first year of marriage. And I loved the vulnerability there. And you were talking about at your 1 year anniversary, even though you loved each other, you were talking about, can we get through this, or do we need to get a divorce? And we all know the end of the story, because here they are sitting here together. I think that is an amazing story and a testament to choosing a shared vision, and a testament to just getting on the same page, making it through adversity, choosing not to live a miserable existence with your spouse. So many people, I think, live a miserable existence with their spouse. And I'm like, the beauty of marriage when you can add to each other's life is something that is hard to describe. I feel like I have that in my life with my husband, but you know, part of my story with the addiction and all of the things that we went through, my husband was with me during those times, and he broke up with me before I went to treatment. Like, we had a lot of adversity in our marriage, and I think that that's why we decided we want to be together. We are going to be together, and I think that that's why we have a rich marriage now. So talk a little bit about that. I think that was amazing, and I think that the vulnerability and sharing that story was also really great, because I think a lot of people, marriage is not easy.
No, Jennifer and I joke now that that sometimes it's hard for us to find things to fight about.
It's great.
Because we fought so much in those first few
great.
years.
You like all those
hashed so much out.
Yeah.
But we really don't. Those first years were miserable. But I think that night in Tel Aviv, when we stayed up all night, I think that was the first time that we really listened to each other, not to come up with an answer, not for me to fix Jennifer or for Jennifer to fix me, but for me to understand Jennifer and for Jennifer to understand me. And I think really trying to understand each other instead of change each other.
Yes.
And I think it helped Jennifer and me both appreciate where the other person was coming from. And it didn't fix everything overnight. And, listen, there are some things you just grapple with your whole marriage, right? But you grapple with it in a productive way.
Yeah.
In a loving way.
Yeah.
And I have to say that men and women are not nearly as similar as we look.
Yeah.
And we don't look similar.
Yeah.
But we are just fundamentally so different. And it's a miracle every time there's a successful marriage. But it's also so beautiful because those differences become strengths. But it takes a lot of work
for sure
to get to that point.
I love that story. I loved how that changed the direction of your marriage. Even though, like you said, it didn't fix everything in one night, it does seem like it was a major turning point.
Oh, for sure.
And I also want to add, you were 18 and 22, 18 and 20? What was it? You were very young.
Very, very young.
I used to be 4 years older than Jennifer.
Yeah. I don't know. She looks pretty young.
Now it's 10 or 15 years older.
Yeah. She looks great. But marriage can be such a beautiful thing if you choose to try and fight for it instead of fighting each other. It can be such a beautiful thing.
And when you realize that we're on the same team, and I think that's the thing we realized that night in Tel Aviv as we stayed awake and just kind of talked the whole night, as we realized we love each other. We just don't like each other.
Yeah.
And we need to learn how to like each other. And the way we learn how to like each other is to understand what makes that person tick. What's really important.
Yeah.
And we kind of came up with this scale that we've used our whole marriage. It's a 1 to 10. And we've learned now, if I ever say, Steve, this is a 10 for me, he will back down.
That's a great tool.
But if he'll say, Jen, 1 to 10, how important is this to you? I'll say it's a 5. He'll say, well, then can we do it my way? Sure. Or if he says, you know what, Jen, this is a 10 or this is a 9.
Yeah.
Then I back down.
Yeah.
And just realizing that I love him so much and I want his happiness.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to make compromises if it really is important to him. Even if it's important to me too, if it's more important to him, then it becomes more important to me that he win this one. And I think
Yeah.
as we've learned to give and take like that, there's never any arguing anymore, because we can just say, okay, how important is this to you? I love you so much. We've never had a time that we've both been a 10. Now, if that happens,
That's good. Call me when that happens.
Yeah, I'll call
I gotta
you.
update everybody. See how that one goes down. I love that. It's my husband says all the time, you can be right about the thing or right with the person. And he's like, I choose to be right with the person.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to
Beautiful.
give up your side, I think, to do that. But is life and marriage and everything not about sacrifice and
It is.
commitment? And so that's beautifully said. And that was one of my favorite parts of the book.
We've encouraged our kids, when they get to that stage of life where they're dating seriously for a mate, is that one of the things to look for is somebody that is willing to be flexible.
Yeah.
A good relationship requires a certain amount of
Yes, it
flexibility.
does. Yes, it does. I agree with that. I think that is something everybody wants to look for. Looks, sense of humor, humility, all of the great things that you can look for, but flexibility is important. I want to wrap the podcast talking about something that I have heard about you. It's not in the book. And I have two more things that I want to ask, because I think that this is such a good tip and tool, and I'm going to copy it and use it with my kids. Darylyn and Daniel Dinner and I were talking about you guys, and they were just talking about how much they love you guys and how cool of a family you are and how they learned so much about you guys and how you raise your kids, and just telling me all these different things about you. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And she said, I don't know, the things that they do. They said with their kids, they tell them that if you bring a sibling with you where you're going, we'll pay for it. Whether it's dinner or Disney or and I thought to myself, I said, what a great idea, and something that is very simple. And they were like, yeah, and it's kept the kids close because they think that their siblings are going to be siblings for longer than they're going to be your children. Mm-hmm. I mean, they'll be your children forever, of course, but sibling relationships are so special. And you helped to foster that. In that, I was like, what a great idea. So I'm going to do that. I think that is so awesome. Whose idea was that? Who's the genius there?
We are parental plagiarists.
Yes. We learned this from some really good friends of ours. We're just like you. We
It's
saw them do it,
good.
and we thought, that is genius. And we started it, I don't know how many.
Yeah,
It's genius.
Mark and Christy Jensen started doing
did it
that.
with their family, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is so smart.
And it really works, right?
It is.
I can always tell when Sam is low on money, because he'll say, "Hey, McKenna Kate, you want to go out to eat with me?"
That is awesome.
I'm like, okay, Sam needs, he wants some.
He needs some money.
And he knows we'll pay for it if he goes with his sister.
Yeah,
You
but then it
know,
fosters a
and
relationship.
it does.
With him and his younger sister, who they're
Yep.
so far apart in age.
Yeah.
They may not have. That whole relationship may not have been as strong if you hadn't done that one single thing as a parent.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Just a couple days ago, I was looking at a picture. We have this mantle that has pictures that come up. And a picture came up of Stephen and Kimmy and McKenna Kate when she was very young, and it was at Disneyland. And that was a sibling trip. And I just thought, as I was looking at that picture, I just thought, I'm so grateful we did that, because
Yes, they might
go
not have
on a
taken
trip
her.
every year.
Every year now.
They do this
that.
sibling
So
trip,
awesome.
the three of them. And now it's with Stevie Kate in London too, and McKenna Kate just adores their kids. But it's a really special relationship.
Yeah.
Because we're friends with the people we spend time with.
Yeah. Well, it's not a world where everybody chooses their family first anymore. I was from a family that my grandma would get so mad when we would hang out with other kids. She wouldn't even call them by their first name. She'd be like, that Thompson girl or that this girl. And my mom and dad were like, okay, it's fine for them to have other friends outside the family. And she'd be like, blood is thicker than water. I mean, they were pretty extreme about it, but we had other friends, of course, and people came into our home. We took in a lot of people. But I think that family relationships and being friends with the members of your family is so powerful and so amazing. It's one of the reasons that I've been drawn to your family, because I can tell that you guys genuinely love each other. I love watching. That's why I love the dinners too. And all families like that just like to be around each other and that value family and that prioritize family and that are intentional about the way that they exist in family. And that's why I'm really glad that Stephen encouraged you to write this book, because I think that it's something that your family is going to have and pass down for years and years, because there's a lot of wisdom that lives in people like you. And a lot of times, because unfortunately it's not documented, it doesn't stand the test of time, and it's too good not to.
I
So
have
I'm
been
so
told
glad you did that.
I have been told I'm a wise guy.
You're a wise guy. You are a wise guy in all the good ways.
Well,
But
thank you.
thank you for writing this book. Thank you for coming all the way here to be on the
Shoot,
podcast.
we got to get away together. It was perfect.
It was great. Good. I'm glad I facilitated getting away together. I love it that you love each other this much after this many years of marriage, too. It's very inspiring.
I'm really glad we do too.
Yeah. It's really awesome. But you worked for that, for
We
sure.
did. We worked hard.
I have a question for you, Jennifer, because I'm a holiday freak, too, that just loves and to go over the top. And I'm so inspired by the way that you decorate. What is your favorite holiday?
Can I answer it?
No.
The next holiday.
Yeah, that's mine, too.
Well, no, I was going to ask you, so with your question, what month is it? Because whatever month it is, that's going to be my favorite holiday.
Okay, so you don't have like a true favorite. Like, this is my favorite to decorate
Okay,
for.
I will say I probably get the most excited about Halloween, which
I
is
love
kind of crazy,
Halloween,
but
too.
I think it's because it is introducing me to all of the holidays.
Right.
It's like I've kind of taken this sabbatical during the summer a
Yes.
little bit, and it's like once fall hits and I realize, oh my gosh, I get to
Here we
decorate.
go.
Here we go again.
Yes.
So I would say I get the most excited about Halloween, but I love them all.
I agree with that because it's after a lull, and when you live for a holiday, Halloween feels so big every single year. And I'm also like you, very faith-based and very Christian. And when people come at me about like Halloween and like that you can't do Halloween because and I'm like,
No.
Jesus loves joy, and like what we got going on here is nothing
pure
but of
joy.
God.
Yep.
Yes. So
I agree.
Well, I think you guys are so fascinating. I think that you are so wise. You are a wise guy in all the good ways. And this book was very inspiring to me. This podcast was very inspiring to me. And I know it's going to be to my community. So thank you for coming on.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
So I will link everything, Rich Routines, the Houghtons, Turtle Creek Lane, and Steve. I'll link their Instagrams and everywhere where you can find these two wonderful people in the show notes. I know that you guys are going to want to follow them after hearing this podcast. And thank you guys so much for listening to the Living Fully podcast. Tune in 2 weeks for more.